The only real difference between him and Basil is that he was small and had a very large hen-pecking wife.
The tension was even worse for Connie Booth. While filming the first season in 1975, she and Cleese were still married. By the second season in 1979, they were divorced, but no one on set knew. They acted like everything was fine. Booth later quit acting and became a psychotherapist, saying the show had been a way to deal with Cleese's flaws. She channeled her anger and heartbreak into Polly, the calm voice of reason among the chaos. That character became her outlet. And then there was Prunella Scales, who played Sybil Fawlty. Cleese created her to represent the kind of overbearing wife he feared becoming trapped with. In one episode, Sybil's medical records list her age as 34, but Scales was 43 when they filmed it. She once joked that Sybil only married Basil because his family was higher up the social ladder than hers. The whole character was a jab at class insecurity and maybe at Cleese's own crumbling marriage. The show's darkest casting decision, though, was Ballard Berkeley as Major Gowan. Cleese wanted someone who could deliver racist lines without flinching. Berkeley was born in 1904 and had the right look for an old colonial fossil. In one infamous scene, the Major uses racial slurs to describe cricket teams. Even in 1975, that was pushing it. When Fawlty Towers first aired on September 19, 1975, didn't set the world on fire, not even close. The debut on BBC Two pulled in a small crowd, mostly people curious to see what John Cleese would do after Monty Python. But the critics weren't impressed. They didn't get it. The wild, chaotic energy of Python had been replaced by a sitcom set in a tiny hotel. Some thought it was boring. Others thought it was doomed. Even inside the BBC, memos were going around questioning whether the whole thing would work. But underneath that early confusion, something was changing. Cleese and co-writer Connie Booth weren't just writing another sitcom. They were doing something entirely new. With faster dialogue, tighter editing, deeper characters, it wasn't immediately obvious. But once audiences began to catch on, the reaction was electric. This wasn't like anything they'd seen before, and they couldn't get enough of it. The magic of Fawlty Towers wasn't just in what aired, it was in what didn't. Only 12 episodes were ever made, just 2 seasons. That was it. But those 12 episodes took 43 weeks of work per season. Every joke, every argument, every chaotic scene was planned down to the last second. Cleese obsessed over everything, even tiny things, like whether both Basil and Manuel should have mustaches, became hours-long debates. 2 mustaches in one frame is too much, he argued. But the perfectionism wasn't just about comedy. There was something darker underneath. Cleese and Booth were married when they started the show. By the second season, they were heading for divorce. That gap between the first season in 1975 and the second in 1979, it wasn't just about writing, it was about surviving the process. The show was killing their relationship. In 1978, they officially split. Finishing the final season took everything they had left. Despite the chaos behind the scenes, the show started racking up awards. It won the BAFTA for Best Scripted Comedy in both 1976 and 1980. The audience finally got it. So did the critics. But not everyone behind the curtain was celebrating. Andrew Sachs, who played Manuel, had kept a dark secret for years. In 2014, he revealed that filming the show was physically dangerous for him, sometimes horrifying. During one scene, Cleese was supposed to hit him with a soft padded frying pan, but in the final take, Cleese used a real one. Sachs was knocked out cold. He hit me so hard I couldn't get up, Sachs said. He ended up with burns, bruises, and a doctor's warning that one injury would scar him for life. When Sachs asked Cleese for an apology, he didn't get one. Cleese told him to pull yourself together and offered him a baby cham instead. The BBC paid Sachs just $700 for everything. Yet somehow, even with all that, the show exploded across the world. By 1976, Fawlty Towers was already airing in Sweden and the Netherlands. In 1977, it hit Australian TV. By the end of 1978, Fawlty Towers was showing in more than a dozen countries. It was dubbed and translated into languages all across Europe. People from different cultures, different histories, different senses of humor were all laughing at the same disaster-prone hotel owner in or key. On October 24th, 1975, something strange happened on British TV. An episode of Fawlty Towers aired on BBC Two that was so funny, yet so uncomfortable, that it became the most controversial of the entire series. It was the 6th episode, written by John Cleese and Connie Booth. Many called it the show's masterpiece, but not everyone was laughing. Right from the start, it felt different. Instead of the usual opening shot of the hotel with the famously scrambled sign, the episode began at Northwick Park Hospital in London. That alone threw off regular viewers. It also cost more than other episodes, thanks to the complex hospital sets and Basil's over-the-top meltdown scene. But it wasn't just the setting or staging, it was what happened on screen that made it unforgettable and deeply troubling. In one of the first scenes, Basil walks down a hospital hallway and comes face to face with a black doctor. He stops. His body jerks back in what looks like surprise or even fear. It lasts a second. There's no line of dialogue, just that one sudden move. It might seem small, but it spoke volumes. Was it racism? Was it just Basil being awkward and panicked like he often is? Nobody really knows. Even now, people argue about what it meant. Cleese reportedly improvised the moment, and the director kept it. That reaction, silent and powerful, set the tone for what was coming. And what came next was chaos. Halfway through the episode, things go from odd to outrageous. Basil, already stressed and recovering from a concussion, begins serving dinner to German guests at the hotel. Over and over, he tells the staff, don't mention the war. Then, of course, he can't stop talking about it. He rattles off war references, slips into Nazi phrases, and then suddenly transforms into Hitler. Yes, Basil goose-steps around the dining room, barking in German and mimicking bombing raids. It lasted nearly 5 minutes. It was loud, extreme, and shocking. He even made up dish names like a prawn Goebbels and a Hermann Goring. The worst part? The German guests weren't extras. They were actual German actors. Their horrified expressions weren't all scripted. They were reacting to Cleese's real performance. One of them even started crying, and at the very end, after the restaurant has descended into madness, a German guest quietly asks, "However, did they win?" That line would be quoted for decades, but none of that was what got the episode pulled years later. Instead, the real problem came from an older character, Major Gowan. During a scene that seemed harmless at first, the Major starts talking to Basil about cricket. Then he says something awful. He uses the N-word, not once, 3 times, and he also uses a racial slur for Indian players. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't even exaggerated. It was just him speaking like it was normal. Even in 1975, people were stunned. The actor, Arthur Brugge, hated saying the lines. He needed several takes to get through them. The goal, according to the writers, was to show how outdated and offensive the Majors were, but many felt it didn't matter. Showing racism, even to mock it, was still giving it airtime. That one scene, only 90 seconds long, was later edited out of reruns. And in 2020, UK TV removed the entire episode from its streaming service. They said the racial slurs had no place anymore. Times have changed, the platform explained. But not everyone saw it that way. When Fawlty Towers was first offered to German broadcasters in the early 1990s, the BBC left out this episode. They figured German audiences would find it insulting. But when German TV channels found out about the missing show in 1993, they asked for it. Actually, they insisted. The BBC gave in. To everyone's shock, German viewers loved it. They weren't offended. In fact, the episode became one of the most popular when it finally aired. Why? Because they got the joke. It wasn't mocking Germans, it was mocking British people, specifically how many of them still clung to outdated views of foreigners. Germans saw Basil not as a hero, but as a walking disaster, a symbol of everything wrong with post-war British arrogance. But that wasn't the only controversial scene. One of the most disturbing moments came from Major Gowan's racist cricket story. He used the N-word to describe West Indians and called Indians wogs. That line was removed from reruns starting in 2013 after discussions with John Cleese's team. But the rest of the show's racial insensitivity remained untouched. This wasn't just a one-off moment. Across the series, characters from different ethnic backgrounds were used as easy targets for jokes. Anytime a non-English guest appeared at the hotel, it usually ended in some sort of meltdown. And that wasn't random. It was written that way on purpose. The comedy relied on mocking outsiders, and it wasn't just a local issue. By 1978, the show had been sold to 45 broadcasters across 17 countries. But in Spain, it flopped badly. Why? Because viewers there were offended by how the Spanish waiter Manuel was treated. Some countries even demanded changes to characters or scripts just to make the show airable. That says a lot. This wasn't British humor lost in translation. It was material that crossed the line for audiences around the world. Manuel was played by Andrew Sachs, and the character became one of the most infamous ethnic stereotypes in British television. He spoke broken English, always looked confused, and got blamed for everything. But what audiences didn't know was that Sachs wasn't just humiliated on screen. He was physically abused during filming. John Cleese didn't always fake the slaps or hits. Sachs once said he fell and couldn't get up after a scene. When he asked Cleese for an apology, Cleese coldly replied, "Pull yourself together and I'll buy you another baby cham." And it didn't stop there. During filming for the Germans episode, Sachs suffered second-degree burns from a fire stunt gone wrong. In another scene, he was hurt by a faulty prop while Cleese was waving it around. Sachs had lived through war, fled Nazi Germany as a child, and still tried to defend the show from racism claims, while being hurt both physically and emotionally on set. He said, "Manuel was a kind soul who meant well." But the way the character was written, always thankful for a job that brought only pain, mirrored the real-life power imbalance between him and Cleese. Then there's Basil Fawlty himself. He wasn't just a stressed-out hotel manager. He represented something very real. A snob who hated the working class and looked down on anyone not British enough or not rich enough. In the very first episode, Basil moves other guests around mid-dinner to welcome someone he thinks is a nobleman. That guest turns out to be a fraud, but Basil is too blinded by class obsession to notice. This wasn't just a funny exaggeration. It reflected John Cleese's real views. His ex-wife and co-writer, Connie Booth, admitted it. She said writing the show was like therapy for Cleese and that Basil showed Cleese's own issues, especially his hostility toward immigrant workers. Basil doesn't just make fun of working-class people. He openly despises them. He calls striking workers layabouts and acts like their protests are an attack on him personally. He flinches at certain accents. He thinks that only cathedral builders and concerto composers count as true Englishmen. That's not satire. That's hate dressed up as comedy. While the show made millions laugh, what happened behind the scenes was anything but funny. Andrew Sachs, who played Manuel, wasn't just pretending to get hurt, he was actually getting hit. John Cleese, instead of using props or fake punches, often hit Sachs for real. This happened repeatedly from 1975 to 1979. Sachs later said in an interview that one of the hits was so hard he collapsed and couldn't get up, and this wasn't just once. During a rehearsal, Cleese was supposed to hit him with a padded frying pan, but on the day of filming, they used a real one. Sachs was knocked down again, and when he confronted Cleese at the bar afterward, hoping for an apology, Cleese shrugged it off. His reply? "You're not doing a long run in the West End. Pull yourself together. I'll buy you another baby cham." Sachs didn't just get hit. He was also burned during a stunt with a fire-retardant jacket that failed, leaving permanent scarring on his arm. In another scene, a ladder missed his face by inches. And what did he get in return? Just $700 from the BBC, not even enough to cover the medical bills. While all of this was happening, Cleese was going through a secret divorce with Connie Booth, who co-wrote the show and played Polly. They married in 1968, but divorced in 1978, right in the middle of filming season 2. Somehow, no one on set knew. They kept it a secret from everyone, acting like nothing had changed. But behind the scenes, Cleese admitted he was devastated. Booth later hinted that writing the show was like therapy. She even said Basil Fawlty's character reflected Cleese's real flaws, including his anger toward foreigners. After the show ended, Booth walked away from both the spotlight and Cleese. She's barely spoken about Fawlty Towers since. But this wasn't the only place where Cleese's temper exploded. His reputation followed him into Monty Python. Michael Pollan revealed in 2024 that one fight with Terry Jones got so heated, Jones picked up a typewriter and threw it across the room at Cleese. This wasn't some slapstick sketch. It was a genuine moment of rage during a real-life argument in the 1970s. Jones, usually the calm one, had reached his breaking point. And that says everything about how hard Cleese was to work with. These fights weren't rare either. Palin admitted they happened often, but this one stood out. The atmosphere Cleese created on the Fawlty Tower set wasn't just rough, it was toxic. Cast and crew lived in fear. His behavior made it clear that complaints wouldn't be taken seriously. If someone like Sachs couldn't get a real apology after being physically hurt, what chance did others have? People accepted the abuse because Cleese was the star and co-creator. That kind of power meant silence. Some called him a genius, but behind the curtain, others saw something much darker. Years later, Cleese would again find himself in the center of controversy. But this time, it wasn't about what happened on set, it was about what stayed on air. On May 25, 2020, George Floyd was murdered in the U.S., sparking massive protests across the world. In the UK, this ignited a deep reckoning with racism in media. Suddenly, shows that had long been ignored were now being re-examined. Just 18 days later, on June 12, UK TV pulled a 1975 Fawlty Towers episode titled The Germans. It included a scene where an old hotel guest used the N-word multiple times and insulted Indian cricketers. The network said it contained racial slurs and needed to be reviewed. The decision made headlines, but it didn't last long. Cleese's response was instant and brutal. That same day, he attacked the BBC on Twitter, calling the removal cowardly and gutless. He said the people running the BBC used to be creators. Now he claimed it was all marketers and scared bureaucrats. His defense? That the old hotel guest was clearly a joke, an outdated fossil being mocked, not celebrated. If people are too stupid to see that, he wrote, what can one say? By the next day, less than 24 hours later, UK TV backed down. They said the Germans would return with a warning about offensive language. It was a stunning U-turn, but the damage was done. The whole incident showed just how divided people were. Was Cleese standing up for satire or defending the indefensible? Even after all that, Cleese didn't let up. He continued his public campaign against what he called cancel culture, using the incident to attack the BBC for losing its edge. Meanwhile, others saw it differently, proof that some forms of power and privilege were still deeply protected. Fernella Scales, who played Sybil Fawlty, is said to be in good health, but she can't remember anything. Some say it's age, others whisper it's something deeper, selective amnesia. Then there's Andrew Sachs, the beloved Manuel. For almost 40 years, he stayed quiet. It wasn't until 2014 that he revealed he'd been physically hurt during filming. He called the set dangerous, and he wasn't joking. The slaps, the falls, the so-called comedy, they weren't always fake. You'd think a show this famous would have endless behind-the-scenes stories told with pride, but the silence is deafening. No reunion specials, no detailed interviews, just vague memories, or none at all. That kind of silence doesn't happen by accident. It hints at something darker, something people still don't want to remember. And then there's John Cleese. He used to be a national treasure. From Monty Python to Fawlty Towers, he was the genius who poked fun at the system. But now, at 82, he's gone from rebellious icon to lightning rod for controversy. In March 2022, during a live panel at SXSW, his mic was literally taken away after he joked about reparations from Italy and claimed, "The British have been slaves too." That moment was more than awkward. It marked a clear line between past glory and present embarrassment. In 2020, he mocked people upset by cancel culture, calling them pathetic for not standing up for themselves. His new home, GB News, a channel that critics call Britain's version of Fox News. The irony is sharp. The man who once mocked the powerful is now their spokesman, and as his image changes, so does the way people view the show that made him famous. The fall hasn't just hit the people, it's hit the show itself. Fawlty Towers was once voted the best British TV program of all time. That was in 2000, but 25 years later, things looked different. In 2020, the infamous episode The Germans was pulled from streaming services because of racial slurs. Viewers who once laughed now flinch. Academics have started to call the show a fossil. Critics have torn apart its portrayal of women. Sybil, once seen as a comic powerhouse, is now viewed by some as a cruel caricature. Words like misogynistic and bigoted show up more often than brilliant or iconic. And when you add in the real physical abuse some actors suffered on set, it becomes harder and harder to separate the laughter from the pain. What used to be seen as clever, rebellious, and untouchable now feels uncomfortable. The jokes haven't changed, but the world has. And what's left is a legacy that isn't just complicated, it's cracking. The silence from the cast, the fall of Cleese, the reassessment of the show, all of it tells the same story.